Hello, my name is Chris Imler. I'm doing my case study research project on the MKUltra experiments. I'll be focusing more on a specific operation ran inside of MKUltra known as Operation Midnight Climax. To begin, it would be a good idea to talk about when MKUltra began and what was the basis of it. During the 1950s, the United States were involved in the Korean War. Many American soldiers were taken prisoner during this war, and foreign intelligence was becoming more important by the year. The CIA was under the impression that the Korean Army was using mind control on American POWs. Rumors circulated that China and Russia were helping develop different mind control techniques. Mind control was a generalized term used for torture back then. Back then, mind control could simply mean sensory deprivation, but we had no idea what was happening to our soldiers. The CIA was worried that the Korean regime was using mind control to reveal United States classified information. They were also worried that these POWs would come back in a different mental state and therefore wreak havoc on the American populace. In turn, this was a serious case for national security. After reviewing all of the data that had been received, the United States then went on the offensive with the assistance of the CIA. According to History.com, Allen Dulles, who was the head of the CIA, approved the start of Project MKUltra in 1953. The basis of MKUltra was to allow the development of techniques or drugs that could be used against the communist enemies to control human behavior with various psychological methods. The CIA worked closely with the United States Army Biological Warfare Lab. During MKUltra, there were various projects that were conducted. It is estimated that there were around 162 different operations within this program. The most notable operation was that of Operation Midnight Climax. During the creation of MKUltra, the head of the CIA was Allen Dulles. You can see him pictured here on the right. According to History.com, Dulles was the first civilian director in the history of the CIA. On April 10, 1953, Dulles delivered a speech to Princeton graduates expressing his concern for American POWs returning from the war that they might in fact be corrupted by the communist regime. Dulles was the first to recommend that the United States combat the possible corruption with the study of brainwashing and the effects that drugs, hypnosis, and sleep deprivation have on the human psyche. This was the start of MKUltra. The exact amount of people tested during MKUltra is still unknown. This is due to the poor records kept by the CIA in the attempt to destroy harmful records in the process. When the projects went to trial in 1973, it was estimated that 80 institutions and around 185 researchers participated. The introduction of LSD was brought to the CIA by a scientist with the name of Sidney Gottlieb. He is pictured underneath the picture on the right of Allen Dulles. Gottlieb was given the position to lead the MKUltra projects from the 1950s until the early 1960s. The LSD trials were conducted on normal Americans. Some of these people grew to fame. One famous participant was Ken Kesey, who is the author of One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He was a willing participant. A picture of Ken Kesey is located on the right. Another famous participant was Robert Hunter. Hunter was known for the Grateful Dead. He is also a great purveyor of LSD culture. However, most of the experiments conducted were on unwilling participants, therefore meaning they were then drugged without their consent. One of the most famous instances of the involuntary drugging of LSD was that of Frank Olson. Frank was a chemist who worked for the CIA. In the year of 1953, at a retreat for the CIA, his cocktail was spiked with LSD. After returning from the retreat, Olson fell to his death in New York in an alleged suicide attempt. During the MKUltra experiments, they made complete sense, but the handling and execution of the research was poorly conducted and extremely unethical. The point of MKUltra was to experiment on the human body's mind and physical structure. The projects were split into two categories, the creation of super soldiers and the experimentation of human mind control. Researchers would sometimes have people sign up for voluntary drug testing, but most of the time they would lure men into rooms with prostitutes where they would then slip them varying doses of LSD. The researchers would then watch the effects of the drug on the men through a two-way mirror. They would do this with hundreds of test subjects and compare the results. According to Medium.com, the idea was that subjects with limited social status would attract the least attention and be less likely to cause any issues. The experiments conducted during MKUltra took place all over the United States and Canada. The majority of experiments were conducted inside of universities, federal institutions, and prison systems. Operation Midnight Climax took place inside of brothels. These brothels were mainly located in the state of California, more specifically the city of San Francisco. The brothels used in Midnight Climax were not ordinary brothels. Instead, they were created specifically for these trials. The CIA specifically made the buildings look trashy and scandalous in an attempt to hide the true identity to test subjects. George White, who was an OSS captain, helped Gottlieb conduct these experiments. White transferred to San Francisco in 1955 and set up one of these brothels in the city's Telegraph Hill neighborhood. White's goal was to give the brothel a French whorehouse appearance. George White can be pictured on the right. According to History.com, Project MKUltra lasted from 1953 until 1973, although details of the illicit program did not become public until 1975. The project came to light during a congressional investigation into widespread illegal CIA activities within the United States and around the world. Most experiments conducted inside of Operation Midnight Climax were during the 1960s. Previous mind control experiments were conducted as early as the 1940s. The actual information about the project did not come to light until 2 years later. The information might have never been made public if it were not for the congressional hearings involving CIA activity. MKUltra was the United States response to rumors of foreign entities using mind control against American POWs. Mind control was already being conducted during World War II by the Nazis. Nazis did not use LSD, instead they used electroshock therapy, sleep and sensory deprivation, and hypnosis. LSD was a new drug that had no prior testing. Gottlieb explained the benefits of the drugs and fast-tracked the research. Since the purpose was to use the drug on foreign entities without their knowledge, they thought it was a good idea to do the same to the test subjects. They wanted to see how people acted without knowledge of themselves being drugged. Midnight Climax involved the use of brothels and prostitutes. Prostitutes were used as a distraction while the drug was administered. While the men would get ready for sexual intercourse, the prostitute would mix the drug in a glass of alcohol and encourage the man to consume it. Researchers would then study the effects on the men while they had intercourse. Those who did not voluntarily sign up would never know they were drugged. This poses many questions on the use of unethical practices such as drugging and spying. The projects were a terrible strain on the reputation of the CIA and the federal government. However, they were in possession of information that foreign enemies had the ability to control someone's thoughts and mind. This in turn was an extreme threat to national security. Unethical studies have been conducted before that explain important information. Studies such as the Milgram experiment were beneficial but unethical. The study of the effects of mind control were very important during this time, but the way it was conducted is extremely unethical. Why did the CIA not conduct any form of oversight on MKUltra? Why was LSD the main drug used for mind control? Why did they only conduct experiments on men? Why were they drugging employees as well? Are there any more cases in which patients committed suicide or any form of other crime? When did they realize no new information was being gathered? By violating ethical codes, they also violated moral codes. They lacked any form of moral theory. They also clearly violated moral commitment. When they were conducting these experiments, they had no interest in the future consequences that lay ahead for them and the test subjects. While scientists drugged and spied on these men unknowingly, they then broke the social contract. In society, we would generally agree that drugging people without their consent is wrong and unethical. We would also come to the conclusion that spying on people without their knowledge is wrong as well. These researchers had no worry for what was right and what was wrong. They did not follow the ethics of care, which is defined as the main task being to love and care for ourselves and other people. These researchers did not care about what happened to the test subjects. They really only cared about results and having a good time. Even when researchers received consent from the test subjects, those subjects had no idea what LSD was and what it would do to them. When performing this research, they were in clear violation of all ethical codes. The CIA broke all trust that the American people had for them and the government. This is my reference slide.